first trauma occurred when I was sexually abused by a pedophile uncle. The barrel on my head and I pressed the first pressure on the trigger. And all I could think about was blowing away my misery.
Welcome to the Founding Healers podcast.
Are you ready?
The first thing, which was the most incredible piece of information that I heard when I met you, was your age. Just because of how you move and how nimble you are and how alive you are. Please, can you tell us how old you are?
I'm 76. A young 76. Halfway through my life.
And your story, I can't do the story justice. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a brief overview of the story of how Rick became to be. If you wouldn't mind, Rick.
Yeah. Once upon a... No, I won't go there. I was born and raised on a farm in England. Very simple, humble beginning. No electricity on the farm, no running water. Parents were both pacifist, loving people. And at 5, my first trauma occurred when I was sexually abused by a pedophile uncle. And that left a scar on my psyche for about 30 years. It took me 30 years to heal from that. And then we moved to Australia, and sunny weather, living the Aussie lifestyle outside, recreational, loved it, went motor racing, built a couple of racing cars, and turned 20 and had to register for the draft, and because the Vietnam War was on, and my name came out of the barrel. It was a lottery, so my name came out of the barrel.
The only lottery you ever won?
It's the only one I've ever won, yes. Been trying ever since, but not successful.
Yeah, no, your luck's finished now.
Yeah. So I was perhaps a little bit arrogant, because when I went to register, there was a captain behind the desk there, and this is in Victoria in Australia. And I said, "Sir, you have to understand that both my parents are pacifist. I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in war and violence." And he stopped for a moment. He said, "That's not a problem, son. You'll just go to jail for 2 years as a conscientious objector." And that's when I had to forego my values. I discarded my values because I couldn't conceive at 20 years of age rotting away in a jail for my beliefs. These days I would do it at the drop of a hat, but at 20 I really couldn't conceive of my friends. I was the only one out of a group that was called up. They were all out there having fun, motor racing, chasing girls, getting engaged, moving up the corporate ladder, and I would be rotting away in a jail cell. So I said, "Okay, I'll go." Well, I said, "Can I have a little bit of time to think about it, a couple of days?" He said, "You've got a couple of minutes." That was it. I take full responsibility. Although I didn't orchestrate the draft, I have to be fully responsible for making that choice, because I could have gone to jail, all right? It would have been a very different outcome. Anyway, a year in the theatre of war was absolutely insane, and contributing to man's inhumanity to man. And it's absolutely senseless. It makes no sense. And for about 9 months, I endured this. I realized that I had to make the best of the situation. I became the section commander, had about 15 guys looking after. And it was horrific. And then I had married my sweetheart, had five weeks together on honeymoon, went off to Vietnam. 9 months later, I got a Dear John letter saying, "I've left you." And to this day, I've never saw her again. But that night, in all the grief and all the horror, I took my SLR, self-loading rifle out. We're out in the boonies, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I put the butt of the rifle into the ground, the barrel on my head, and I pressed the first pressure on the trigger. And all I could think about was blowing away my misery, the pain, the trauma. And fortunately, a mate of mine came out of the tent for a pee, saw me sitting there. It was a little bit open space and moonlit night, and he just calmly sat down opposite me and said, "How long you been here?" And I said, through my grief, I said, "About 20 minutes. And he leant over, took the rifle, ejected the bullet out, said, "I know you, Purcell. You're definitive, you move into action, you've kept us alive for all this time. If you were going to do this, you'd have done it 20 minutes ago." And he was right. I was sitting on the fence.
And what do you think it was that was holding you on that fence? Why? What was that will to live?
I think it was the reaction that my parents would have, that they would, if your son goes to war, you would imagine that they may not come back because of an enemy fire. You would never imagine that they would take their own life. And the pain and anguish that would serve on my family was probably keeping me on the fence. So that was my wake-up call. For the next about 3 nights, sleepless nights, tossing and turning of this stuff over, I came to the conclusion that I'm 20, wet behind the ears, still wet now, right? Wouldn't it be better to find out about life? And then if you don't like it, do something about it. And that was my serious wake-up call. And that put me on this path of uncovering curiosity, asking the questions, critical thinking, right, about what is the meaning of life? Mm. Who am I? What am I here for? What is my gift that I have? Mm. So when I look back now, this was an amazing time in my life. Mm. And I wouldn't change anything. If somebody said, I'll give you $2 million if you go back there and change everything, I'd say, no, not interested.
You're perfectly happy.
It's brought me to this moment in time.
Yes. So looking back now, the decision between 2 years of prison or 1 year of war, you would choose prison.
I would. If it was mean to go to war again, I wouldn't even countenance that. I would go in there. Told my wife, bring me a classical guitar and I'll come out a flamenco guitarist.
Okay. Now I have a question which you can choose not to answer. But when you went to war, were you put in a position where you had to harm other people?
Of course.
Yeah.
That's what war is about. That's what war is for. And I got sucked into the propaganda. And the idea there was communism was Reds under the beds. All right. And Vietnam would be easy prey for Chinese communism. This is the propaganda. So you need to stop them there. Otherwise, you'll be fighting them. They'll come down the peninsula and you'll be fighting them on the beaches of Cottesloe, Bondi, and Darwin. Mm. So it's your duty to stop this. And so the Australian Army trained me how to kill another human being. That's what they do. That's what your war is about.
Mm. And it's kill or be killed. So
it is. It's raw survival. There is no real analytical thought behind it. Mm. That we're all connected, and this meat body is insignificant to who I truly am behind it. Yeah. All right. But at that stage, you've been driven down into survival. Right. So it's just pure raw survival.
So you look at a person like yourself now at where you are in life, having gone through sexual abuse, overcome that, and then war, all the post-traumatic stress which comes with war, and you're still here where you are. What does the journey look like after the war? How do you get to where you are now? How long does it take?
Good questions. Very good question. I took myself, when I finished up in the army, my dad said, look, we can see you're really traumatized. You've got money. There's no job to come back to. You're not going to go stay in the army. He said, you've always talked about going back to England and motor racing, Formula One. This might be a good time to think about that. It was such an unselfish statement, and one that he's passed away now, but I'm so grateful he gave me that opportunity. Perhaps another parent might have said, we need you here. We've been worried sick for 2 years. Don't leave again, right? And he virtually gave me permission to go, and it was a good idea. A month later, after I finished with the army, I was on a ship and plane to England. And I stayed in London for about 6 months. And then I bought myself a Volkswagen Combi, decked it out in a hippie wagon. We're now talking about, 1970, 71. The hippie era was well in. I was now growing my hair back. And this had kangaroos and all the 60s stuff on it. Yeah. And I drove down to a place called Cornwall in the south of England. where we would go once a year to see the seaside. And no sooner arrived, it was around about autumn, hardly any tourists down there. And I went into spontaneous healing. And I had no idea what was done. I had no religious background. My parents had said, when you boys are old enough, you choose your path. That's not a choice for us. And I'd had no spiritual understanding whatsoever. So this was all totally alien. And I am going through this trauma, screaming, crying, shouting, throwing rocks, all this flashbacks happening. And then occasionally I'd have a moment of absolute stillness and quiet. And the mind had moved away. And I was writing this exquisite poetry, right, which I could never stand at school, which subsequently got stolen in Barcelona. So it was never meant for it to be published or anybody else to read it. It was meant as part of the healing journey. And then the flashbacks would occur, the pain, the anguish. Yeah. And I went for about 4 days with that. And I thought, a couple of times I looked at the rocks. We're right on the edge of the cliff there, the Volkswagen and me. And I thought it would be very easy to end this. Is this how the rest of my life's going to be? Because I had no idea the duration. And I had no idea what was happening or who was guiding me. I didn't even know I was being guided. I was just going through this process. I know now what the guidance was. And then on the 5th morning, I was laying in my bunk. The sun was streaming through the windows, looking up at the roof lining, and it's all gone. Nothing. There's no charge. It had moved from the unconscious into the conscious. And I laid in my bunk there for about 4 hours, going through every minute of Vietnam with no grief, no trauma, no charge, just as if I was watching a movie. Not a painful movie, but just a movie. And I was a silent witness to this, untouched. And that was an extraordinary time in my life. I think that's really what put me on my path. Wow, there's something else beyond this meat body, beyond these thoughts, behind these emotions that I carry, behind this life story that is Rick Purcell. And that something is grander and bigger and majestic. I guess I was touching the first symbols of my sovereignty.
Yeah.
All right. And it was huge. And from that moment on, it's all purged.
Yeah.
I've been back to Vietnam, I think it's 4 times now. Walked into an ex-Viet Cong village, had a huge reunion with, they were my enemy at that time. They were my brothers and sisters this next time. So that was one chapter of my life. And I've built on that. Now, what is the meaning of this? I want to go deeper into this.
Yeah.
Which led me to India and Swami there.
Insane. So you have been through multiple times in your life where you've questioned living.
Yes.
And you've contemplated death. Right now, there's a lot going on in the world. Sources saying that we're going into a recession and people are struggling after COVID still, and perhaps there's a lot of people who are questioning their lives now. What advice do you have for somebody standing on that cliff or with their head on that barrel right now?
Don't do it. It's not an option. I do believe in reincarnation. I have some inklings or some knowledge about some past lives. And so I'm very, very sure that that is a facet of our life. And that if we were to come back, we would still be embracing the same lessons. So I think we come into each incarnation with a major ruin in our life that needs to be resolved, but also with a life purpose. And the life purpose is associated with the challenges, and we are guided to overcome those challenges in order to lift our game, in order to share the gift that we have, that we've been given. So if we choose to check out, it means that we haven't overcome that challenge. And what happens in most cases with people is that the challenge is there, it's a little tap on the cheek. This way, you need to do this. And we ignore that for whatever. There's so many distractions. There's Britain's Got Talent, there's this Facebook, this social media, there's work, there's sex, there's everything can be a distraction if we want to make it. And we become very addicted to that. So if we don't learn the lesson the first time, the universe will give us a slightly bigger slap until, like I got, was the baseball bat. Right? Wake up. If we choose to check out, then we'll come back and we'll reincarnate and we'll be faced with that challenge again. Only now we've got the trauma of having given up. So push through, right? Just push through. This is not the end of the world, all right? It might feel that way, and it sure does feel that way. It's no fun. But look for the light at the end of the tunnel. Look for the rainbow.
Yeah.
And be very grateful and appreciative of what you have.
Yeah.
Don't resist what's happening in your life. Radically surrender and accept it. Right?
Yeah.
This is the reality that we're facing now as a human family, individually and collectively.
Yeah.
We need to embrace that and then rise above that.
And the thing I love that the metaphor you use is the caterpillar and the butterfly. We all see this caterpillar, and the caterpillar probably thinks it's dying. And then just as it dies, the butterfly emerges.
Yes.
And I guess that ties back to your whole philosophy.
Yeah. We're going through the human metamorphosis. Some are still out there gorging themselves, not with leaves, cabbage leaves, but with materialism, consumerism, adulation, fame, fortune, control, power. They're still gorging themselves on that. Some are the caterpillars dissolved into quantum soup. And some people are there with no idea what's happening. I don't belong here. This doesn't exist anymore. And I have no idea what the future holds. But in the chrysalis, in amongst the imaginal cells, the butterfly there's a knowingness that something else is birthing, right? And if we just play that along and allow that to happen, right, then the butterfly will emerge from the chrysalis, flying free, shining its beauty on the world. So some people are in the quantum soup. That's where we might want to check out, right? Now you start to look for what is in the imaginal cells, what is possible for me, what is under my control. I can't control the politics of the world or the economics of it, but I can control what I put into the world and how I address it. And then allow this spark of life to generate. And there are some that are still in the quantum soup, and there are some that have emerged and are building exactly what you're building with finding healers. The imaginal cells are formulating and coming together from, I know your story, right? You've been in the gorging process, you've been in the quantum soup, and you too have emerged from that, shining your beauty on the world. And if we can do it, everybody can.
True.
I'm sure of that.
Would you say then a caterpillar needs to gorge in order for it to build its cocoon to then die?
Yeah.
Would you say then it's probably best for us to gorge on service, selfless service, as opposed to materialistic accumulation?
Well, I don't think gorging is good in any shape or form.
Okay.
And I think it's a quantum leap from being in the quantum soup to being of service. Being of selfless service is considered to be the highest form of consciousness. And the lowest form is raw survival. So if you're at the bitter end, right, you're in survival. You've got to come up through that pyramidal consciousness. And consciousness is the key to it.
Yeah.
Being more aware.
But these levels which you speak of, from survival to service, this is why the program, the entire structure keeps us financially unsecure, unfulfilled, because it wants us in these survival states. The moment we progress, which I believe we're moving into, I believe that the youngsters of today and people my age now, these digital nomads, are tired of working in an office. People are seeking value for life. I think we are breaking free from this survival mind, moving into this conscious existence. You know?
This is, now we're broaching the ego. The ego is a peanut bunch of cells in the left hemisphere, and the definition of the ego is a false sense of self. So anything that originates from the ego is a lie, and we tell ourselves this lie. I'm unlovable, I'm deserving, I'm never going to make it. Much of it is conditioned reactions that we've learned. And why do we have the ego? Because it shows us what we don't want. You and I know that when you arrive at a point where I don't want this, I don't want to keep reading this book, I don't want to watch this movie, I don't enjoy this place, I don't want this job, I want something different. The moment we arrive at I don't want begets the question, what do I want? And that then sets you down this path to what is possible.
Yes.
Now we can dip into the field of potential. What can I bring out of the potential and manifest it into the world? This is why we have an ego. It's showing us what we don't want. That's on a micro scale. On a macro scale, we're seeing collective egos that are showing us what we don't want. Right? Who wants war? Military-industrial complex does, right? And the financial groups, but the bulk of humanity, supposedly 99%, I don't subscribe to that. I think we're there 100%. The 1% is reflecting what we still have a little bit inside us. But the collective ego is showing us what we don't want. This is waking up people to saying enough. We've seen it in Holland, we're seeing it in Germany, we're seeing it in Brazil, we're seeing it all over the world. People are saying, we've had enough, right? And they're pushing back against the narrative and the control and the power. So this, on a macro scale, is what's helping to wake humanity up.
Yeah.
If we can see it from that bigger picture, the eagle eye picture, then we can see, oh yeah, I can see how this is unfolding. All right? We're going through the Great Awakening. Unprecedented number of people are waking up, right, to their true core, their true being.
Well, this is one of the reasons why we think finding healers is truly going to change the world.
Yes.
And not only finding healers, but let's say any platform that comes out to do the same, follow the same mission that we have. The more people who have access to this way of thinking, to these new appreciations for life, these people are going to transform and create a better world. And I want to come back to the levels of consciousness, or you describe the cycle of need of change.
Yeah. Let me describe consciousness. Right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I can't. I don't know of anybody that can. How can we possibly label something that is infinite, that occupies everything and everywhere and every place? The best we can do is saying, being aware of what's happening on the inside and what's happening on the outside. But that's not consciousness. We are conscious of what's happening, but that's not consciousness. Right? And there's the problem with trying to put a label on something. Right? We can say, I can say camera, but that's a label to that device there. It's a signpost. So all these other dimensions that we live in, we can only put a label or a signpost towards it. We can't define it. So it would be to ask me to define the levels of consciousness, the penultimate one would be infinite, and infinite has no level.
True. So let me rephrase that. The cycle of need of change, how you describe that there comes a point in somebody's life when they feel the need for change.
Yes.
And it's only at that moment that they will truly change. You can't take a horse to the water and make it drink.
Sure.
So can you divulge a bit further about that?
Yeah. Usually it takes some drama, some catalytic moment that forces people to change. And I truly believe crisis is the driver of change. It's what drives change. If you look at our planet now, we have crisis in the biosphere, the ecology, the education system, the financial system, politics, they're all in crisis. And that is the driver that is changing the new people coming in, the millennials, Gen Zs, the people that are awakening can see in the imaginal cells there's something better that we can create. And so the trick in life is don't wait for a catalytic moment. Don't wait for the baseball bat. It's just continuous improvement of your life. Who am I? What am I here to do? How may I serve? Right? We can't jump from raw survival into serving others because there's a degree of consciousness that needs to be garnered. And as we become more awakened to our true nature, then there will be a natural propensity to want to help people, to want to share, to collaborate and cooperate with people. And then we finally finish up in human terms that the best thing we can do, the greatest joy that I can do is to be of selfless service. And there is, from a monetary point of view, and just sharing my own experience, the Pareto principle is 20, 80, 80, 20. I give away 80% of my material and monetize 20%. So 80% is free. I do need to monetize it because I need to put food on the table and raising 2 teenage girls. So there's nothing wrong with money. It's when it's misused. Money is just energy. It's when it's how it's used and misused. That's the problem.
I like that. And I'm glad you brought up your 2 teenage girls because this is a topic I really wanted to talk to you about today. And that's the idea of conscious parenting. In my opinion, conscious parenting or a parent-centered approach to parenting is quite literally something which can change the world because it embodies this idea that a parent needs to heal themselves before they move on and pass on all their unhealed trauma to their kids and all future generations. You are a shining example of somebody who lives a conscious parenting existence. You're an impeccable parent to your kids and you do homeschooling and you run their curriculum and you do all these things. How did you come to that decision and how did you take that first step? Is there an element of fear in taking that big responsibility for yourself, or is there just this element of excitement because you look at the current schooling options that are available to you and you say, well, I can definitely do better than that? Where do you stand on this one?
I think the catalyst for me was that for many years I've worked at creating a new paradigm. I can get glimpses of what this new paradigm looks like, and it feels like it's almost like a native knowingness. I can't define it necessarily, but the imaginal cells have been stirring within me that there's better ways of doing things. So the driver of that was obviously my own conscious path and journey. And I totally agree with you. If we can teach our children different ways of doing things, but we have to be conscious in the first place. And so having a glimpse of what the future could potentially look like, I wanted to introduce my kids to that at an early time, rather than going down the same old stuff that I went through, right? And I hated school. I hated school because I had a maths teacher that was depicted in Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. They were talking about my maths teacher. I had an English teacher that stood me up in front of the class when I'd moved to Australia and made fun of me on my accent so the whole class could get a laugh. And I was bullied at school for being an English migrant. So I didn't want to perpetrate that on my kids by going to school where there is violence, there is bullying, there is separateness, there is superiority. That whole thing didn't work for me. I'm not anti-education. I'm very pro-learning. And what could I get them to learn? Well, the basics of reading, writing, or arithmetic, and English, and some history, right? But what would be more advantageous was how to communicate openly and authentically, conflict resolution, right? Emotional intelligence. How do I deal with my own emotions and the emotions of others? that these days in the States, we see people resolving conflicts with handguns in schools, right? So how could I equip my kids with in-life basics that could gain some perspective on life instead of regurgitating their old ways of doing it? So that was the modus behind it. And so far it's working very well.
Yeah.
And it's given me the opportunity, by observing them close up on a daily basis, where's their interest, right? One wants to be a writer, so channel the bulk of her schooling into writing and researching. I said to her, whatever online writing, creative writing course, it's bought for. We put the money aside for your education. You choose it. Right? The other one is an artist. She loves drawing. She wants to do animations. She loves anime. So most afternoons they do between 1 to 2 hours of drawing and creative stuff. So writing, drawing. And recently I came across a new form of education, which is new paradigm. It's a transition to the new paradigm, and that is comic books. We've all read comic books as kids and loved them. Now, if we can superimpose some history or some school subjects into the comic form, there is both text and pictorial images. Well, we know that enhances our ability to learn and grasp and remember things. So these two kids, and it will be their choice, but one's a writer, the other one's a drawer, animator. Why don't we create a living classroom of comics animated for schools? And that's what I could see potentially, but it will be up to them. And I will give them all the resources they need. Up until the time I said, Dad, I don't want to be. I want to be a football player. Good. They're already going to football 3 times a week. That's their social life.
Yeah.
So, and we change direction ourselves. So if they change, does that matter? No, they got so much joy and pleasure out of it.
Yeah.
And they've said now that we're learning more than we've ever learned before.
Well, you see, this is the thing. This is the difference in philosophies here, is that, firstly, I used to be a teacher. Well, not used to, I am a teacher. I studied teaching, right? So I'm very familiar with curriculums, and I'm very familiar with the pressures that parents put on their kids for certain grades and what they expect of them and what that pressure does to the kids. I see it firsthand. It's brutal.
Yes.
Sad. Actually, It's very sad. It breaks them down. Kids at 9 years old are anxious, biting their nails, stressed, can't sleep. Why?
Yeah.
This is not cool.
Yeah.
So there's this shift in education, which is moving from the old syllabus where even if you didn't like maths or you were not a mathematic intelligence, you were forced to spend hours doing it and you still had to pass the tests. Whereas now there's this new belief that everybody has their own intelligence, and depending on which intelligences, which a kid could have multiple, they would then focus on those areas. So instead of becoming just average at maths, they would become a genius at music or a genius at art. And so they follow their strengths to become a genius or a expert of that field, as opposed to just passing and scraping through on the areas which then are not their strengths.
Yeah.
And of course you need a baseline to be able to make it through life. But let's be honest, if you're not good at maths, you can use a calculator, right? You're not going to go be an accountant anyway.
Yes.
So this is what I love about this new homeschooling shift, which is happening. And it happens a lot here in Bali.
Yeah.
The area of conscious parenting that I love is the area that if your child is misbehaving, it's not a reflection of your child. It's a reflection of you. Are you anxious? Are you angry? Are you reacting from an ego, or are you centered, rational, calm? Your child is a reflection of you. And somebody which I absolutely love to follow is Dr. Gabor Mata, who speaks about ADHD, and he speaks about childhood trauma quite a lot. And his philosophy on ADHD just blew me away, because he said it's a tuning out. When we go through life, if we're in danger right now, we leave, right? Or we fight. This is our fight or flight. A child can't leave and it can't fight.
Yes.
So it adapts to switch off.
Yeah.
So if your child is growing up in an environment which is unfavorable and he's not happy, he switches off. And so this is why he can't concentrate. That coupled with the terrible diet, which parents aren't aware of how to feed their kids because they don't know how to feed themselves a lot of the time. All of these things this is our future. These kids are our future.
Yeah.
Start with yourself before you have kids. We don't want your problems in the world. Fix them and then have kids.
Right. Yeah.
This is what I want to drum into all parents.
I think there's a proviso on that.
Yeah.
Not all kids are planned, of course.
Of course.
And when are we ready? Because I feel that the more I learn, the more I delve into consciousness, the more I realize how little I know.
Yes.
So when is the moot point to say, okay, I'm ready for kids?
Yeah.
That's a difficult one.
It is difficult. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I understand some people don't have that choice, but there are people out there who consciously decide to have a baby because either they're about to turn 30 and society has told us that this is the time now. If you don't do this, you're failing at life.
Yeah.
You haven't got a house and you haven't got a kid. Oh my God, what are you doing? Or they do it because they think it's going to save their relationship. And this is the saddest thing that I have ever heard of, because who suffers? The kid.
The child.
The kid.
Yeah.
So I think people who have a child accidentally should be encouraged to use this as their sign to work on themselves.
Yes.
And that's what's beautiful about this movement of conscious parenting, is because now it's moving into the stage of, oh, I understand my responsibility on this child's life. I understand what happens if I don't work on myself and how it will manifest itself in this little child. Kids going through schools shooting people.
Yeah.
Right? That's not it's the kid's fault, but there's parents to blame.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. For me, the universal solution to all of humanity's woes is becoming more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
That's the root cause of it. The root cause of irrational behaviors, unwise behaviors, unintelligent behaviors is a lack of consciousness. So if that's the case, then if we shine the light of consciousness on that unconsciousness, our behaviors will become wiser, more intelligent, and more encompassing, helping everybody.
Mm.
So that's, for me, is the universal solution. Becoming more conscious. It's for me. I think I will becoming more conscious to my last breath, and then whatever's after that.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yes.
Right? You're never going to arrive.
That's
You're
right.
just constantly chipping away.
Yep.
And it's amazing. It's the awareness to chip away.
Yes.
How often do we see people trapped in busyness with no time to reflect, with no willingness to reflect, because I've been so busy. Now I've got a free minute or a free hour or a free day. I'm just going to do nothing. And they just switch off and they numb their mind with food, alcohol, PlayStation, pornography, whatever it might be. And this is just a cycle that doesn't end. And so I wish I knew a formula, because how do people move out of that when I'm sure everyone's like, I've got bills, dude. How do you decide to find time, create time? But again, I think it comes down to a willingness. When you are willing and you're at that need of change, you find a way.
Yeah. Well, one of the routes to that is to have enough conscious awareness to establish what you value in life, what is important to you, right? And if it is money, just pure money for egoic sake, which the ego can never get enough, then that will be your pursuit. But if you consider family, being of service, improving my conscious awareness, looking after the environment, then that will change the whole story. So our education must incorporate values. And I put my kids through that. Go down this list and mark out 8 of them. And then prioritize them.
They pick their own values, or you instill values in?
I made a list of them.
Okay.
Right? There's some good websites out there. 1 with 400. Don't go down that one. It's confusing. But if you've got 20, just go down the list there and think that one is injustices upsets me. Oh, good, put that on there. Justice is the opposite of that, and then prioritize them, right? And for me, integrity is right at the top. Right?
Absolutely.
It actually surpasses love, right? Because if you haven't got the integrity in the area of love, it's going to collapse. It's not going to work.
So true.
So integrity for me is being honest, truthful, responsible, and being authentic. And when you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Do it.
So if that's, and I want to remind my kids, so remember the other day you said you were going to do something? Have you done it? No. Okay. Which value is that? Oh, it's integrity, Dad. Yeah. Okay. What could you do about it? Well, I can go and clean my room now.
Ooh.
Right? So it's gentle. There's no making right or wrong out of it.
Ooh, they have decided.
And I learned these from my dad and my mother. Right?
Have you chosen to learn the human designs of your kids, and has that shaped the way that you communicate with them at all?
Not at the stage, no. It shaped the way I see my life, and that has an impact on them, but I haven't actually done human design or that.
Okay.
That'll come.
Have you thought about it? Because when I speak to some of the human design coaches, a lot of the conditioning that we face is due to our parents not understanding our design.
That's coming.
Yeah.
It's on the curriculum.
Are you going to teach your kids?
Oh, yes.
Design?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And anything else that is in alignment with them understanding themselves more and why they do things, the behaviors of it. So.
Okay, so here's a great question. Speaking of understanding ourselves and why we do things, how would you guide your children to find their purpose?
I would look at them, I would ask them, always checking how you feel about this, right? Part of their curriculum now is a short movie, maybe 10, 20 minutes long. I want you to watch this, watch it first, get the concept, then watch it back, and then answer these questions. How do you think this woman felt, right? How did you feel watching this? So I'm checking in all the time of what do they feel as opposed to what do they think. So feeling all the time, checking in with them. How did you feel about this? What did you feel? Did it make you feel anxious? Did it make you feel upset? Right? So we're now rolling the subject into emotional intelligence. And the more they feel and sense and what they're thinking, right? What is the prevailing thought about yourself? All right? How do you degrade yourself? What's the thought? Right? So now they're sorting out the mental aspects, the emotional aspects. We're looking at diet and health and well-being as part of the curriculum as well. Now we got those 3 bodies, and the other one is the spiritual body. So we're rolling that into it. So we're addressing the 4 bodies as part of their holistic education or holistic learning, better still.
So would you say then the key to finding your purpose is learning to switch off the mind and feel through the body?
You have to feel what is right for you. How do I feel about I drew something and it made me feel really good, all right? Not what you think about it, because you thought, well, I could have done this. And the ego mind, the moment we start thinking, the ego mind says, oh, I'd like to chirp in here, right? And it'll always be derogatory and it will always be a lie, because it's a false sense of self. So by moving from the head to the heart and addressing the heartfelt, how does the heart feel about this, all right? Now you're connecting with a deeper sense of self. The heart is the portal to the infinite, right? We can't think a way to awakening or enlightenment, if you have a silly word, but we sure can feel, and the heart is that portal to it.
Yeah.
So all the time I'm checking in how you feel.
Incredible.
Yeah. And now if you get a whole bunch of subjects about feeling about drawing, art, anime, comics, color, all of that. Well, let's pursue this. And then that becomes an interest, and that's what they love doing.
That's cool.
Just watch all the indicators. How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
Right? I'm watching them all the time.
Cool.
Right? And I see how alive they come.
Yeah.
And that aliveness for me is a measure of being on purpose, your passion.
I think that's a good measure.
Yeah.
Really. Do you think that there's an element of fear in managing their education? Fear that you might miss a step, or responsibility that wherever they end up is 100% your fault almost?
And no fear, no responsibility. Yeah. I don't know where they'll end up. I don't know if they'll finish up hating me for not guiding them towards college and a degree and a master's and a PhD. I have no idea what the future's going to hold for us. All I can do is the best by observing their feelings and their sentiments, their enthusiasm, their curiosity. Observe that and feed the resources into them. I can't do it for them, but I can provide them with the resources. I have no attempt to occupy the time with getting them to do things that I never had the opportunity for. That's merely a projection.
And that happens, eh?
And I've seen a lot of people that
happens. You look at these kids pageants in America. I watched some show once. Like, that blows me away. That's got nothing to do with the kids.
Yeah,
that's the parents. There's some issues there.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some healing that needs to be done there.
Yeah, and it's rampant.
Yeah,
and usually the wealthier you are, the more rampant it is. It's virtually adversarial. Dad, I want to go surfing. I love the ocean. I just want to go surfing. Well, you're going to be a doctor, son, like I was and your grandfather was. You'll never make any money as an artist or surfing, all right? You'll just be useless. That's just a projection.
Yeah, and also the scorecard is money, not happiness.
Yes.
There's the whole gap in communication, the whole missing link.
Yes.
The focus is on money and success and not happiness.
Yes.
So somebody who hasn't really understood yet that happiness brings you money in the ways that keep you happy, they might be thinking to themselves, even if they watch this now and they say, yeah, but you need money to live. The more I learn about this and the more that I journey down this road, the more I learn that it's not a this or that. It's not happiness or money. It's happiness then money, not money then happiness.
At 26, I learned the definition of success from a teacher, and it was the warmth of a person's heart. There's no Ferrari in the garage, no $1 million in the bank. How warm-hearted are they? That they would help a little old lady across the road, or do something for someone else. To be compassionate towards themselves and others. Be grateful and understanding, being humble, being brave. All of those qualities of the heart as they're expressed outwards, that to me is the sign of success. And that can be married to money. I've used the example of the guy from Patagonia who just gifted his whole company to the earth, not to his sons, not to investors, but gifted it to the earth. And he's wealthy. He's a billionaire. He's made a lot of money by helping people to get out there in nature and equip them with what they needed in order to climb mountains. Nothing wrong with that. But he's given a lot of that away and supported a lot of people. He could have made a killing. He didn't. He gave it away. That's warm-heartedness.
That's cool.
And that's truly where we want to come from.
Yeah.
The ego can never, ever be satisfied.